Hello. This week, no, it's not a chemical vial or a detonator for a huge bomb. I'll open it up, and a lot of you will already know what this is. You certainly will by the time I've unscrewed it and then screwed it back together. It is an apple scoop for scooping the middle of your apple out. Possibly the most pointless object in the world, because I think anybody would eat an apple holding it like this and throw the core away. But it was not the done thing from the 17th century up until about the early 19th, mid-19th century. It was a matter of etiquette more than anything else. It wasn't practicality that you would remove the core of the apple before eating it. And I always thought, well, why did they make these things? They're utterly pointless. Then I hit upon a reference that during dining, particularly in the 18th and 19th century, any unattended ladies, and of course unattended ladies would probably be young single ladies, if served dessert, would look for assistance from a male member of the group to prepare their apple for them. And immediately it sort of fell into place. This is less to do with coring an apple and more to do with pulling birds, women, forming romantic attachments. This is your gold lighter in a 1950s club leaning over to light the lady's cigarette. This is your Rolls Royce when, in the words of Sean Connery, your rival pulls out a bone apple corer, you pull out a silver one. It is more about status than anything else, and just basically the theatre of producing that and saying, young lady, let me help you for a moment, as you, bit like James Bond screwing in the silencer to his pistol, assembles the lethal weapon, the apple corer, and you duly remove the core for her. And the fact that you've got a silver apple corer enamours her to you in so many ways. I can't believe it works. Any young unattached women out there, if you're enamoured of my silver apple corer, DM me afterwards. But that's basically why they were made. I think they don't turn up very often. The majority of them are made in Birmingham, certainly from the end of the 18th century onwards. Initially, they are fixed, solid one-piece apple corers. It's only later in the 18th century that you get this screw thread, or this capacity or idea to make a double screw thread where you can screw it and then retract the blade and then happily carry that in your pocket whenever... Seems ridiculous. Whenever you see a young lady holding an apple in desperate need of having it cored for her. I don't think women's rights were a big thing in the early 19th century. I think if you tried it today, you might get a punch in the face. Why did I buy this one, though? Was I desperate to attract beautiful young women with apples? Maybe, always have been. But no, I purchased this because it was catalogued with that wonderful phrase that we always look for, which was with rubbed marks. Now, we know what rubbed marks mean. It means two things. It can mean two things. It can mean the marks are rubbed, and there is a little bit of lack of definition with these, but it mostly means that the person that's catalogued it doesn't know what those marks particularly mean, so they just say with rubbed marks to excuse their ignorance. Is that too brutal? Possibly, but well deserved. There was, I have to say, an attempt to say what the initials were on. It's marked on the end of the handle here. I can't stop screwing and unscrewing the bloody thing. It's a fabulous toy. And also on the inside of the blade. I'll stop doing that now. Here, it's got an Incuse maker's mark. Here, it's got a Cameo, a normal style of maker's mark. That's interesting. That wouldn't happen in a lot of places, wouldn't happen in London, wouldn't happen in Birmingham. And the description of the mark was RC over JT. Now, by the time we got to the J, anyone that knows their provincial silver will know that we're actually looking at RC over JB. And the B was slightly, because it's a curved surface, slightly not fully struck, so it looked like a T. But of course, that is the working partnership of Robert Cattle and James Barber of York. So all of an instant, a rubbed, worn, marked, possibly Georgian apple corer was transformed into a very rare York provincial apple corer. I've only seen a couple of other York apple corers, both of which have been over £1,000 in price, so well beyond my pocket. And then there was this one, which was estimated, well, we'll save the blushes of the auctioneer. We won't say how much it was estimated for. It did not, I can assure you, cost £1,000. I was thrilled to get it, A, because it's York, very rare, B, because it's by Cattle and Barber. Now, Cattle and Barber silver, particularly when it's something quirky, gives you an added layer to the delight of collecting these things. And this is what it's all about. It is about the hunt. It is about finding something someone has missed and swooping in and possibly even buying it for a bargain price, although that's the money side should never be the big thing of it. It's often about the discovery. It is for me. And also what you can say more about the object. Now, in this book, which I know a lot of you will have, the book What I Wrote, as Eric Morecambe might say, we have a transcript of the York Assay Office ledger, which I always intended to be a tool for collectors of York silver. That's why I wrote it. I wanted to be able to use it. I wanted to be able to go through the records, the only record that exists of what was assayed at York, and learn more about objects. Now, this piece is particularly interesting. It has the Incuse maker's mark on the end, because that is the smallest punch that Cattle and Barber had, and they used it in the most difficult areas. It's actually a mark for gold rings and for gold work, but it is found on some silver when the normal mark that they had was just too big. You couldn't have struck it on the end of there. And we'll look at that in close-up very briefly to show you. The other thing is, it has a version of their mark that I've only ever seen twice, which is a much more elaborate punch. Instead of RC over JB, it's RC, and then there's a gap, there's an ampersand, and then there's an IB rather than a J in a long rectangular punch. I've only seen it twice. It is only illustrated in this book. It isn't illustrated in any other work on York silver, because I think nobody else had noted it up to that point. And this apple corer, excitingly, is the third example of that mark. So excited for all sorts of reasons, but more so because an apple scoop being such a rare thing, we should be able to locate it within the Assay Office ledger. So we should be able to date it. And this is one reason why this book took me so long to write, because it wasn't just a transcription, I'll give you an idea, a transcription of the existing ledger, but it was also an index. The index took longer than the transcription, unfortunately, and I only realised I had to do it after I'd transcribed the ledger and found out it was practically useless without the index. Gold first, which is just gold rings, so that doesn't really help, but silver. And actually the first object that's catalogued, because it's run alphabetically, are apple scoops. And there weren't that many. That's the exciting thing. You can quickly add up how many apple scoops are known from within this period by certain partnerships. And because the Assay Office ledger covers the beginning and the end of the Cattle and Barber partnership, you can see exactly how many they made in total. So Cattle and Barber, through all their working life, and they produced, you know, a quantity of silver, made 1, 2, 5, 9. 9 apple scoops. That was it. And that's over a 6-year period. A lot of you will look in your books and you will see that Cattle and Barber's Mart, even in this book when it was first published, runs from 1807, the end of 1807, to 1814. It doesn't. It runs from the beginning of 1808 to 1814. It does not cover 1807 because the few first parcels listed in the ledger for Cattle and Barber actually bear the mark Robert Cattle was using on his own. And I don't think that's been published elsewhere. I haven't updated this since it was written 14 years ago. So that's a new bit of information for you, unless you follow me on social media and heard all about it. So I was able to look up when these scoops were assayed, and I've written it down so we don't have huge amounts of page turning and fumbling. And the very first one of these was assayed in the 23rd of March, 1809. And 1809 is also when this very rare version of Cattle and Barber's mark was seen on other objects. They're dated 1809, so that all ties together beautifully. The very last parcel, which was 4 apple scoops, or scopes as they're written in the ledger, was on the 8th of June, 1810. So all of a sudden, because we've got this historical background to it, this documentation, we know only 9 of these were ever made by Cattle and Barber. How many have survived? I doubt more than one or two others of these are nestling in collections. The rest will have gone. So that makes it tremendously rare. But we also know, and something the auctioneer didn't know, and I wouldn't expect the auctioneer to know, to be fair, that this has to date from the 23rd of March 1809 to the 8th of June 1810. Because that's the earliest and the latest that these were ever submitted for the assay. And I would suspect, because it's got that rare maker's mark, it's actually veering more towards the 1809 date. And it's just a very rare thing. And this is the whole thing about collecting. It is about learning more about the object. It is about bringing a bit of context to it. And how exciting does that become? Because we know all of that. Because we know when it was assayed. We know how many, exactly how many of these were ever made. And how likely it is that not many others survive. And, you know, that's what collecting is all about. And also, now that I've got it, I will be bedecked not only with single young ladies, but with lots of apples, which is absolutely fantastic. This, I should say, because I know I say a lot of things that I show you are available, and they are. If you see other things, this sadly is not. This will be staying with me. But I hope you've enjoyed seeing it, learning a little bit about silver apple scoops, if you didn't know it already, and the real purpose why they were made, which was the impressing of impressionable young women with apples. History's a funny old thing, isn't it? So until next week, keep your eyes and your apples peeled. Good antiques hunting, and goodbye.